We lived in a house that had no electricity whatsoever. We always had lamps. And fact is, lights didn't come until 1944.
The difference between having the electricity and not having the electricity is what you call easy living.
First few years I was a lineman, we provided service to a farm that had never had electricity yet. And I thought, this is just like we're pioneers, you know? I thought it was great. People can build out in very rural areas, and the co-op has served them, even though it may look like, you know, there's no money in it, but the model is to provide that service to anybody that can conceivably use it.
It gave a lot of jobs to people. It gave you something that you had an interest in because you felt as if you were a member of something.
The lights, oh, it was so wonderful to have lights during the night for our house. We appreciated it so very much. They've been good to us. Otsego Electric Company, very good to us.
May I introduce our co-editors for this edition of the Longines Chronoscope. Larry Lasser of the CBS television news staff and Kenneth Crawford, National Affairs Editor for Newsweek magazine. Our distinguished guest for this evening is Anchor Nelson, Administrator, Rural Electrification Administration.
Mr. Nelson, here in a big city, even the poor of the stuff take electric light and power for granted. But how much of the United States is actually without it right now?
About 9% of the farms in America are still without electricity.
How much would the electrification of the whole United States help us in building up markets here?
There has been $4 spent in equipment and wiring and one thing another. And in addition to that, the productivity of agriculture has been enhanced because of the availability of electricity.
The Rural Electric Cooperative formed during the FDR administration as a means of helping rural areas emerge from the Depression era. Many of the farms, of course, didn't have any electric service at all. They were using Delco battery packs, for instance, to run their operation, or maybe using nothing at all, just doing everything manually.
This co-op was formed in 1941. Because of the war effort, we couldn't get materials. Mr. Winfred Arnold, he was a promoter of this, and Mr. Arnold would say, you know, well, they're promising us that, you know, maybe by spring we can get some wire and that.
World War II, we couldn't get materials. We couldn't get some of the wires and basic necessities to build the system. So really from the time that we started in the early 40s till post-World War II, it was really just an early stage of organizational documents being put together and getting people interested in the organization as a cooperative.
Now wires swing out to the country. They're stretching out, long wires, reaching out where wires never went before. There's a tune as the wind blows through the wires.
Post-World War II eventually is when Otsego Electric got up on its feet. And they were able to get materials.
And then they came around and they put stakes in where the poles were going. They started setting poles. And up in our country, you can only drill between 3 and 4 feet, and you're right on shale rock. And the guys, they didn't have any augers like we got out here in these barns today. They had an auger on a small tractor, and they drilled down that far. Then they'd have to start digging. Put in a stick of dynamite, step back, and touch the dynamite off, and it blow up a little bit. I mean, you didn't have to run for out of town because it was only a small hole.
Primarily, it was to extend to farms, really, at the beginning, and then from there to households, to bring conveniences into the households. You know, the refrigerators, everything.
We had no electricity anywhere. We washed our clothes in a scrub board. We had lamps, and the thing I hated the most was I had to clean the chimneys. Constantly, they would be so black from the fire.
I think that one must have been a hard one to carry around. These seem quite substantial. I'd hate to have to do it nowadays. We just had lamps in the house and no bathroom, no refrigerator, no nothing. And everything had to be where it's cool, went down cellar.
According to the old-timers, if it weren't for the ladies in a household, the co-ops never would have really gotten going. The initial board of directors was a group of typically farmers. They went door to door to their neighbors and tried to talk them into helping them form this co-op, and the membership fee was going to be $5. A lot of the gentlemen, the head of the household, so to speak, would say, $5 is a lot of money, and the wife is over there, doggone it, Charlie, get your $5 out, we're going to get electricity in this house. And if it weren't for those ladies saying that, probably the co-ops really wouldn't have gotten going like they did.
And interestingly, looking at the Articles of Incorporation for Otsego Electric, 2 or 3, I think it might have been 3 of the initial founders of the electric cooperative were women. Really quite remarkable, because for an organization to be led by women at the time was kind of unheard of.
As a kid growing up, I would see the crew go by the house, hauling poles and stuff like that. And it was a real small crew. Gosh, when I started, there was only 5 of them. And I always thought, as they're going by, I thought, geez, that looks like a neat way to make a living, out there in the outdoors. I didn't know that it was a member-owned, not-for-profit organization, that all the good stuff about it. All I knew was it looked like fun work.
We've always said that had the investor owns like NYSEG, if they could have ever foreseen what the rural people, the farmers, were going to use in electricity and barn cleaners, silo unloaders, hay dryers, bulk tanks and all that, they would have never let the co-op come in. We were just pittance to them. They didn't want us because all they could see was a few light bulbs here and there. It wasn't worth their effort. Now people want to get on the co-op instead of the other way around.
I think that this is the superior way of doing public power and delivering power to the communities. I wish that it could be expanded into more territory. Unfortunately, there are legal limitations to doing that, but the concept of local and membership control and ownership of these kinds of resources is a superior way of doing things, I think.
No problem. Have a nice day.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You did a great job.
Thank you.
Well, they get the lights right back on really quick when they're out, and been really good.
I would say that working for a co-op, it's a little more family-oriented. You're more engaged with your members, so you treat things a little bit differently. I think, you're just working for your members, so there's just a little bit of satisfaction in that.
And of course, they had the yearly meetings, and I can remember going. Then they started having gifts that they passed out, and that made the crowd bigger and gave them something to talk about.
It is a business meeting, but it really has a personal touch. We have kind of like a fair ahead of time where tables are set up and various organizations around the county come in, present what they do and what they offer. It's a fun occasion, a little bit of music, a little bit of food, and then a little bit of business. It's evolving over time that younger members don't understand that we need them desperately to come to the meeting, and to communicate that necessity is a challenge.
It was so much simpler. They'd come and read our electrical outlet stuff, and whenever we'd get our bill that way, or we'd read it and send it in.
Reading the meters, it's difficult, especially in the wintertime for the elderly to get to their meters, so they was guessing. And of course in the spring they'd catch up because you could tell the ones that weren't reading the meters every month because they were guessing. And so at some point in time they'd have a larger bill, especially in the spring.
They'd write their readings down and mail them in. So now we import them once a month, and we could actually read meters every minute if we want to.
Our IT guy can see if my power's on. He can check if there's an outage or something. They almost can pinpoint it. There are so many qualified people that are educated that are working for the co-ops now.
We have a lot of people who come in every month to pay their bill, and really it's a social call. They're coming in to say hello. They've been members for many, many years. They know everybody. They want to continue a personal relationship with us. We all know that we're providing a service as a business to people, but we're also able to be responsive to needs and to look out for our neighbors.
At least I get to see you once a month.
Similar to the other electric cooperatives in New York, Otsego Electric gets all of our electricity from the New York Power Authority. About 8 megawatts of that comes from hydroelectric from the Niagara project. When we need additional power, the New York Power Authority acquires that on the open market for us to supplement times of year when we're in a peak, the winter usually. The big push right now is to build a fiber optic network, and that's taking up a lot of our time and resources right now. That'll be for the next year to 2 years, partly funded by New York State broadband grant money, which is very valuable to us, but we're also putting our own capital and resources into the project as well. As required by the state, we had to contribute at least 20 to 30% of the cost of the project, and then we're building out to non-grant areas as well, areas where we didn't receive any grant money at all to build. We feel it's part of our mission to provide this service to as many residents of Otsego County as we can reasonably get to.
We're running messenger wire, which is basically what they hook the fiber to. They'll run it along underneath it and then lash it to it after the fact. We're just doing the preliminary work to get started to offer broadband.
May 11th, 1935 is when Roosevelt signed the REA bill to bring electric to rural America. It's like what we're doing now with broadband. People don't want to live here unless you have high-speed internet. People want to work from their homes. We're working hard to make sure that we get it out to the membership. That's going to be a blessing to a lot of the people.
The organization has changed somewhat just because of the technology that's involved, but I think the same as when I was here. There's still darn good people here. They work hard. They're committed. They know what they're here for, to serve that member out there, and they do a good job of that.
Concern for community is one of the 7 principles of the co-op, and that's one of the top things that they do, concern for community.
And we're not just a utility, a investor owned. They got to make money for the investors, where if there is any money made, it goes back to the owners. If you belong to the co-op, you're an owner, a little piece.
The member out there owns this co-op, and they should protect it. They should protect it like it's their baby, which it is. They should appreciate what they have here, because I certainly don't have access to it, and I'd love to.
Some might think that all the electric company is a switch on the wall. Doesn't matter who it comes from. So we have a challenge of communicating with newer members who come from outside, maybe, who have never been on a cooperative or even heard of a cooperative. So there's always an ongoing effort in our newsletters and in our social media communications to try to inform people that you're a member owner of this organization, and that's kind of an eye-opener to a lot of people, for sure. It's unique.
Then one day, as we were eating our lunch and having some tea, a man knocked on our door and said, "You're the folks I want to see." He stood there with paper and pen in his hand and said, "REA has laid out a plan. We are trying to bring our electricity through, and we want to know if it is okay with you." So we all yelled, yes sir, we do. So when these wires were hung on the wonderful day, it gave us light to show us our way. So at the age of 93, I want to express my thanks to the folks at REA. God bless and keep up the good work. Sincerely, NEVA MAXSON.
It's nice to know that they're there and they would help you if you needed help.